As David Zinczenko said, isn't kids suing McDonald's like rich men suing Porsche? That's what some would think due to the increased obesity in the United States recently. We will look at the increasing obesity in the United States by first looking at Zinczenko's narrative and then two other studies that have been done. In David Zinczenko's narrative by Graf and Birkenstein in their book They Say I Say in 2014, he gives his story on why obesity was prevalent in his life due to the fast food industry. He says that 30% of type 2 diabetes is because of obesity. He says that it was hard to get nutritious food, having divorced parents and being home alone all the time. And then he says, drive up the street and go find fast food. Easy enough, right? Now drive up the street and try and find a grapefruit. Not as easy. That was his point. He also said, as his naysayer, shouldn't people know better? But on your McDonald's hamburger, you're not going to find a nutrition label saying you're eating 500 calories, add in the drink and the fries, and you got a full meal of half your calories for the day. And it also doesn't have warning labels like tobacco does, saying, dangerous, this is warning, you may gain weight. But the problem with his is it's only his one perspective narrative. But he does have credentials. He's written his book, Eat This, Not That, which gives you different options so you don't always choose the bad fast food. And you can have some healthier alternatives while still going to the fast food places. He also has many books entitled Zero Belly Fat, which gives several recipes with little to no fat in them. But what he's saying is based on one person's views. We can't take one person's views as everyone's. So now we will look at a study. Marlowe and Shear's study in the relationship between fast food and obesity in 2012, they took over 500 people between 2001 and 2009 over the entire United States, and they looked at the restaurant density in the US. So they would take the number of restaurants all around the world, and then they would compare it to the per person capita rate. And this showed a high density, so they thought they might have a good correlation here. But the problem with that is when compared to Australia, they had the same rates. The only problem is Australia doesn't have the obesity rates that the United States does. Then they continued on. They did a phone book study based on age, race, and habits to see if a differing factor besides the fast food industry would be to blame. So they were wondering, why would the fast food industry be a dominant factor? What about their exercise habits? What about their race? What about how old they are? These all are different determinants based on that. But what they found was no support for the fact that fast food is causing the increase in obesity among the US or any of the other dominant factors. This is an important study because it was done over 8 years, which is a substantial amount of time, and they paid attention to detail and differing factors, taking different variables into account. Now we will look at our survey of the health of Wisconsin, and this is based on the association between economic hardship, retail food environment, and fast food intake and obesity. This is by Michael Laxey in 2015. What he sought to do was to see if social and physical environment play a role. He did this between 2008 and 2010 with over 1,500 people. He did this by breaking it up into cluster sampling. He took demographics, socioeconomic, and exercise habits. Therefore, he would have different variables in different categories. So he then did a questionnaire asking them their exercise habits, where they live, how much income they have, trying to get all these different variables to add up and find some correlation. And he also did density of fast food, like Marlowe and Shear's study showed. What his showed was a weak indication that economic hardship has anything to do with more fast food consumption, and there was also no great correlation between any of the factors. This basically says what the other study says. But, however, he is highly credible because he checked in with the University of Wisconsin to make sure all his statistics and formulas were up to date and accurate, and he had people backing him up, making sure he was doing everything correct. He also had 1,500 people, which is 3 times that Marlowe and Scheer study, and found the same results. Now we have to look at what this study shows. We take one person's personal experience versus multiple studies with over 2,000 people. To me, that shows that the studies have more credibility and that we should take those. However, if Zinczenko had a book full of stories based on everyone gaining weight and obesity due to the fast food industry and did more studies, then maybe we could lay more credibility on him. However, that's not the case. We also saw that both studies showed no strong correlation between the fast food industry and rising obesity in the United States. So that leaves us with what's next? What's causing all this obesity in the United States? So, if Zinczenko saw these studies, he would understand why it is absurd for kids to be suing McDonald's.